Oh, somebody's funny behind me. They want me to say I should start this gathering with dearly beloved. We're gathered today in honor of. Uh, Good day to all of you, whichever day it is that you are experiencing, whether it's the 3rd or the 4th of November. And for those of you who are entering into spring or are in spring, it's a wonderful concept to be in two seasons at once. Although, if you're anywhere psychic or intuitive, I think we're in a lot of seasons all at once. Some galactic seasons, cosmic seasons, earthly seasons. We're in many, many worlds at the same time, trying to balance all of it. But it's a great privilege to be with all of you today. I've been looking forward to this, and we're going to start with a brief little centering where I bring the shield in for us to feel very protected and cleared, and just a nice little way of beginning the day. I have to put this bad joke in. I apologize to my script writers, but the other mantra that I used to use during Obama times was Obama, 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 instead of Llama, 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 Llama. So, it's a bad pun, but I'll leave it there with you. See if you're awake. And
Okay,
maybe I just put you to sleep. I don't know. But
before
humor
we
is in.
begin, excuse me, Jeanne, there's a couple of people who haven't muted themselves.
Let us
Uh,
mute.
Gloria, good, thank you. And let's see, I think everyone else is muted. Okay, sorry to be the bad cop, but
Well,
just
maybe I should mute and just telepathically communicate with all of you at once. That would be great, because
you could do that in zero time, then we wouldn't
that's
have to waste
right.
an hour.
Anyway, um,
Sorry, go ahead.
laughter and levity and joy are very important to any gathering, because oftentimes we're very serious, and I feel that the balance needs to really be encouraged. So let us begin by knowing that we're going to have a wonderful experience today, being able to share, to listen, to learn, to gather, to commune. And in order to do that as nicely and as quietly and as safely and as blessedly as possible, let us just for a moment take a deep few breaths, perhaps close our eyes to relax, bring ourselves into a grounding so that we're very connected to our Mother Earth, but we're also allowing ourselves to expand. With those slow, deep breaths, we go into, for those of you who have been following the procedure, into what we call the first shield, which is our own individual shield. It's configured in the protocol that I use as a small pyramid, four-sided, and it just comes over us. We're in the center of it, and there are two boundary lines, one that is at the base of the small pyramid, and the one is about a foot and a half out from the base. And I always think of these lines as a moat to protect us from any outside forces or influences that are not of the highest good. And they actually have they radiate that energy of protection all the way to the top of the pyramid. And as we're in that wonderful space, we just breathe in slowly and deeply. We relax knowing that, this is our really protected personal space, guided by spirit, guided by the light, guided by the sacred I am and source, however we visualize that. And as we're breathing quietly and gently and slowly, we clear and allow any discordant thoughts to just wash away, to just flow away into the light. So that if we have been particularly rushed or frustrated or have concerns, all of that just kind of flows away into the light, taking that burden off of us. And we breathe with that. And then the next thing is to clear ourselves from any kind of psychic dust bunnies or psychic debris that might attach or just find us floating through the ethers as we're in this space of um, prayer and communion and gathering. We just clear that all away, let it go. Any concerns, frustrations, etc. Feeling a peace and a calm and a direction that brings us into our center. And then we clear for any really dark energies, um, the bottom feeder energies that might be knocking at the door, trying to just be influencing any and all people. And as intuitives and sensitive healers, we often experience that, so we're letting all that go, and we're very protected. Any toxic streams or what I call AI generated interference is also being cleared so that we are breathing into the most pristine, sacred space that we are able to become a part of in this moment in time in prayerfulness. And we're just grateful to our guides and our spirit beings and our friends and family on the other side for joining us, plus those people who have been part of this global gathering who are now on the other side. We welcome their presence and love feeling their closeness to us, relaxing and feeling this. And then we go into the larger group shield, which is a much larger four-sided pyramid. And we find a nice comfortable place to sit. Some people may prefer to imagine themselves sitting on the floor, but there are beautiful recliner chairs there. And as we walk in through the energy of the angelic node. We know that the White Brotherhood has their protection group there for us. And we have 4 energy bands that begin to swirl around us. The one closest to us is moving in a clockwise position. Then the next one is counterclockwise. The third one is clockwise. And the last one is a blue-violet color, and it moves counterclockwise. And they begin to spin from floor to ceiling. And as they spin, they create this wonderful synergy of protection and also bring in the highest frequencies that we are able to be a part of in this wonderful protected energy where we are really able to balance ourselves and the human stories and also connect to the greater reality. Let's just take a few moments to be in that beautiful space, really connect ourselves, our heart space, all of our chakras, our body to this wonderful healing energetic so that the day becomes a wonderful experience. We have no expectations. We just know that we're entering in to a place of beauty, of safety, of wisdom, of joy, and allowing our parts to integrate into a unified field so that this day is a profound and generous experience. We are grateful to all of you for your participation and your willingness and all the gifts that you bring to this group. All of you very talented, loving, caring souls. What a wonderful place to be right now. And that's how we enter into this day's activity and discussion and experiences of mysticism. So we can just gently open our eyes and be ready for our stories and our experiences and all the goodies that come with our gathering. Ooh, lovely. You're also lovely.
I have somebody with me, and I'm giving him permission to talk, but I told him he's got to leave after he says it. As a young boy, and he wanted to tell his mom and dad, "Thank you very much for the walk." And he said that whoever this is, I'm not sure. He said that there were hundreds and hundreds of children and people on his side walking with mom and dad and everybody there. So I'm not sure who this is or who he's talking to, but the person on the other side, I think someone knows who this is, but they know what the walk is about.
Thank you, Regina.
He says he'll step out, but he's coming back when Emma can talk too. So that'll be fun, whoever this is. It'll be fun.
But who is Emma?
Emma is Karen's daughter.
Oh, okay, yeah, because Karen's been around, that's for sure.
Yeah, Karen's, yeah. Yeah, we were, I don't know if you were on when we were chatting about Karen and having a Karen's Day on the 29th of December.
Well,
And
that's good. No, I wasn't. I'm
okay, good. Well, now you know, and it's a Karen's Day, and they're having um, um, cheesecake, right, Wendy?
Yeah, Cheesecake Day. That Jeannie Karen's 29th is Emma's angel date, and for many years we would remember Emma and have a piece of Emma's favorite cake, which was cheesecake. So a lot of
that's
us
my
know.
girl.
A lot of us know that Cheesecake Day. We'll invite all of Karen's friends and have a special day. Hopefully, we can hear from Karen and Emma. I know Karen wants to be heard. She'll have a lot of things to share with us.
Well, she actually was saying to Regina and myself, was it yesterday and maybe Thursday night, how she has plans.
Well,
She
well,
says, I have a lot to share, I have a lot to teach, I have a lot to share with the group. And she's just been, at this moment, I'm kind of in a different part of my file system in my brain, so I don't quite remember all of what she said to us. But she was wanting to tell us all about the other worlds and her experiences with being able to be shown things and the synchronicity of this cosmic uh, creation. And she's ever the researcher, and she just they invited her in. The higher up said, "Yeah, you're ready. You can go." And she made no time wasted. She was there, and she's just been gathering all sorts of uh, wisdoms and enlightenment and understanding because she's such a seeker. And so I think she'll be talking to us a lot
right,
before December 29th.
right. So
It's not that far away. So yeah,
it's
that's
not that far
wonderful.
away, right?
Oh, excellent. So well, today, after we had completed a month ago when we were on for Cosmic Oasis, I got the instructions of what we were supposed to do a month later, which is today. And that was to talk about our mystical experiences. And I chose that term when we were talking with Dan yesterday. Um, I know when we expand, oftentimes we don't want to get caught up in certain perceptions of language. Uh, we often shy away from the choices of talking about religion and such. And sometimes we go a little bit one more energy away from the mystical experience or using that terminology and call it psychic or paranormal, or there's a lot of different kinds of ways to speak to it. But I feel that since we've been taking these steps from opening ourselves up to the synchronicity of spirit, and then the following through with having experiences with spirit and or ghosts or whatever, and then now coming into the mysticism, I think that I want to just explain how I approach that word and what it means to me, and so you know where I'm coming from in shaping this. And for me, and I'm going to have to just share a little teeny bit about why I use this word. Because I grew up in a musical family, and because I was gifted with a lovely voice, I had such a musical field in me as just a young little kid that I realized as I started to go as an adult into my world of understanding mysticism and God and spirit, that my first experiences with the mystical was my singing. And I remember very, very clearly as a little 3-year-old sitting in the living room with we used to have an old Victrola, and it was a big special thing because you could actually make a recording on it because, of course, we didn't have CDs and all that stuff back then. And but we had, the big records, and my parents had a couple of records, one of which I loved, which was the singing of the Lord's Prayer. And from my earliest memories, remember sitting as a really young child, sitting in the corner, playing that song over and over again and singing to it over and over again because that's what I had available. And I was addicted to it. I don't think I was more than 3 or 4 because of what it did internally to me, what it called forth, what it brought forth, what it awakened in me. So for me, my first experience, although I couldn't name it as mystical, was really that because it opened up my heart and soul into this world that I thought everybody lived in. And some of you may not have had early experiences. Some of you may have had experiences, later on. And of course, there might be more than one, but just interested in, the ones that are particularly so so obviously present that we'd had to stop for a moment, maybe took our breath away. My father had an experience which he never told me about, but his sister did. And I thought that was interesting because my dad was a very spiritual guy and within the construction of Christianity, but he wasn't one that would, proselytize, or he wasn't into that kind of Christianity. It was the love for Christ, the love for the church, for God, not church. But my aunt told me one time after he'd passed, he goes, "Oh, yeah, we were talking about things in the mystical sense." And she said, "I'll never forget your dad telling me his." And I said, "Oh, what was that?" And she said, "Well, in the middle of the night, he woke up one night and they were both from Scotland. My dad had been here for quite a while and then she joined him. And so she was living in the same house with him temporarily till she found her own working space. She said he came and told her that in the middle of the night he woke up and the room was just brilliantly filled with light. And he hadn't turned on any lights. There were no lights on, but the room was just brilliantly filled with light. And he had what he called this cosmic consciousness awakening, where everything just seemed to fit into place and everything just opened up and he became this different, person and energy. And I thought that would be so interesting that he didn't share that with me. And there is a book out, and I cannot remember the author, I apologize, you may, called Cosmic Consciousness. That came out a long time ago, 60s, I think, late 60s, maybe early 70s. And it was talking about these cosmic conscious experiences where you wake up in the brilliance of this light. And I was so impressed because I was in my 20s when I was brought that to my attention. So anyway, that is the attention for today. And then, of course, it can lead into other discussions and questions and offerings about the mystical. And the last thing I'd like to add is the reason why I feel it's important is because I remember Gandhi saying you can't be spiritual without being psychic, but you can be psychic without being spiritual. And I always felt that was a wonderful, at least for me, understanding because I never walked into this part of myself as a medium or as a psychic on purpose. I was just very hungry to be in that energy of what I thought was, my training, it was God. And I was a Quaker, so Jesus was a part of that, but it wasn't something that was the most prominent part of my experience as a child. It was music, it was the energy, it was the flow of consciousness. And that's where I was headed, that's where I wanted to be. And from that came the gifts of spirit. And so I was just thinking this is a very positive thing for all of us because that belief and that trust and that knowing is so important in any of the things that we do in our life and how we live and how we believe and how we manage to go through hardships or how we help others and counsel them through hardships is that inherent core system of that, as Tesla calls it, the God code, the 369 God code. And there's a long story behind that, but I'll just leave that in just part of the understanding for right now. So that's the shape of today. And I think if I've left anything out, we'll get to it. Dan, do you want to share one of, we talked to you, we were going to choose an experience.
Sure. I've been working on it because I've had so many little things all my life. I think probably as far back as I can recall, what initiated my doubts about the prescribed reality, um, was the experience as a very young child of having precognitive dreams. And I didn't understand it, but it was enough to sort of undermine my assumptions about reality. And if I had had no other experiences than that, it would have changed my life anyway. Um, so that's probably the shortest story I can tell. I could fast forward maybe to one other one. Um, let's see. I was at a. I'm a terrible meditator. First, mea culpa. So I'm at a particularly wonderful workshop back in the 1970s, and there was as part of the exercises in the workshop, there was a meditation. So I sat down and didn't expect much of myself, but almost instantly I found myself tumbling upwards through a tunnel. That tunnel, and I'm literally tumbling, and I come out on top, and I find myself floating in space, and I'm totally disoriented. Where am I? What is this? What? And all of a sudden, I'm aware that I'm looking at a planet, but it's like a pure white billiard ball, this beautiful sphere. I said, what is this? What am I? And then I realized suddenly that this is Earth seen in another frequency. And as I'm looking at it, it's slowly rotating. And what's coming into view as it rotates is an area of the planet that has this big, ugly red swelling or a welt coming up from it. This really kind of disturbing energy, but it was like a physical swelling coming off the surface of this beautiful white sphere. And I'm being impacted by this energy and say, what is it? What is it? What is it? And then it hit me all at once that this was the energy of World War II in Europe.
Amazing.
And I was born in 42, so the war was still on, and what the impression I got was like this was the last thing I saw before I came in. So it was like I was almost blasted back into my body, and then I cried for 2 hours.
And when I first met you, I remember you sharing that story and how profound it was. And I would say that would be, really life changing, even if it was something that faded in the background for a while. It certainly powered your journey,
Mhm.
for sure. I really love that story. I mean, it's a sad, profound story, but I love it and the impact that it brought to you to remember who you are and why you're here. And let me just say, I forgot to do this. We're going to use the format that we did similar to last month, where after I'm going to ask Gina then to share something, and then we'll ask all of you to, if you have something to share or something to ask. I think what you said, Regina, was to put it in the chat, and Dan, if you could just kind of moderate that chat, that would be great for me,
Okay.
and do that so everybody gets a chance to share and participate. I mean, I think all of us have had amazing experiences, and I look forward to being able to tie some things together. Thank you, Dan. That was wonderful. Yes, because you have something else. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, there's one more which I could be pretty brief about, which is kind of the other side of that story. Do you mind if I just take a couple of minutes?
No, go right ahead.
Okay. A few years back, I did an LBL hypnosis session, Life Between Lives work. I'm sure most of you are familiar with Michael Newton's work. And this was a session that was given by one of Newton's trainees. And without going into the whole story, the core of my experience, the between life experience, was it took place in what seemed like a circular temple with a very high ceiling. And in the center of the floor was a a kind of a wedding cake platform that stepped up to a narrow area on top. And around the base of it were a bunch of us souls. And in my vision, then we looked like a bunch of little candle flames standing and glowing and moving around the base of this platform. And one by one, we would climb to the center of the platform where there was a beam of energy coming down from the apex, from the top of this.
Gives me chills.
Right? And each of us would stand in this beam until we couldn't take anymore, and then we'd go down and someone else would go up top. And different souls had different capacities, or they could stand it only for a few moments. And to the extent that I had a sense of time, we'd be up there maybe from anywhere from 15 seconds to a minute or so. And then we come back down and kind of digest it or process it or whatever we did, and then we go back up at the next opportunity. And so this to me was, whether literally or metaphorically, a sense of our having been kind of tasked with this energy, bringing it through to the world in some whatever form was appropriate to us and our talents and our interests. And so I've been wondering how many other people have had this or some similar analogous between lives experience or impression or whatever. I've noticed you chuckling there, Jeanne.
Oh, yeah, because I was thinking of my own. That's wonderful.
And
Yes, and I'm anxious to hear from, I don't want to say I'm anxious, I'm eager to hear others' moments that way as well. Regina, what would you like to share?
Oh, I'm not sure if I've shared this before, but I know Jeanne knows this one. I didn't have any, well, I couldn't say I didn't have any profound. There's just been so many. But I think the original one was I would see spirit all the time, but didn't know it was spirit. It was just a ball of light of energy that would enter my bedroom every night when I was a little girl, all the way up until the night before my 8th birthday. And it came to me as still the light. And every night it was always teaching me. It was my best friend in the world. This being of this energy ball or whatever it was. And it said to me that it was no longer going to be coming to me. And I was just so upset by this whole thing. And I asked it at my young age and very learning disabled, what was its name? I never knew its, never called it anything. It just was there, present every time, every evening it'd come in, float on into my room. And it spelled out the word spirit. And when I figured it out, because I had written the letters down on my hand as it was spelling S-P-I, and when I realized, Spirit, Holy Spirit, I've got the Holy Spirit every night. Oh my gosh, because I was raised Catholic, it's got to be the Holy Spirit. It can't just be Spirit. It's the Holy Spirit. And I wanted to run out and tell my mom and tell the world, and it said I couldn't tell anybody. And that I wasn't to tell anybody until I heard from it again. It was to be a secret, basically. And I kept that secret as much as I saw, as much as I felt. I had a lot of precognition. I could see things, conversations, illnesses. I mean, I could talk about that, but I could never talk about spirit. And I was 22 and I had my firstborn, and I met Jeannie. And a few months later, Jeanne and I were sitting on the floor in her room, or in her little mobile home. And she said, let's sit down and meditate. And I'd never meditated. I thought, oh, no, I'm Catholic. Don't we pray instead? Aren't we supposed to pray? And she said, no, we're going to meditate. I'm supposed to be teaching you. Well, let's do this, And I thought, I was like, oh my God, this is bad stuff, because that's what they were taught. So, and so I'm sitting there listening to her, and she says, Spirit's here, and he's got a message for you. I have no idea. All I know is it was the Spirit's here. He's got a message for you. and it's time. And I don't remember what the message was, except that all I know is that was all I needed to hear to know I can now rejoin the rest of my life. It was cathartic. It's so cathartic. And I remember going home and laying in bed, just crying and crying that night, relieved I could talk about spirit. And my husband didn't know any of this stuff, didn't know I could do all these things, or feel all these things. And so that was the first big giant hurdle to this whole process of all of this stuff. And it was life altering, and it was really hard, life altering, but it was the right thing. And it wasn't until I was an adult that I really fully understood why I couldn't talk about it, especially being raised 12 years of parochial school. So as it was, I was always challenged and always in trouble, but that was truly life altering. And I've had so many more since then. And each time, spirit's here, spirit's talking. And, I just got to listen, just got to listen.
Well,
So,
and there again is the synchronicity of spirit, and that our lives are really, there's always variations on a theme, but there's a general plan and thread through, our waking day and goals and experiences that we've chosen to have to continue our path of awakening here in this kind of unstable dark planet. We can't do it all at once because the configuration of the energy doesn't support it. And I want to share further in terms of, for those of us who had earlier experiences, I think the one thing that made it possible, for at least for myself and maybe for Regina, is to do all the big huge channeling with the Challenger material, was because we had this very strong foundation of spirit and our connection to God, presence, the I am source, whatever we called it. We had this, at least for me, and I know for Regina, because,
faith.
yeah, we just had this incredible balance. And I don't think either of us, and I know for myself, could have gotten through the rigors of what was required in the channeling, because otherwise I wouldn't have had the root system to keep me anchored and balanced. And as it was a big challenge in and of itself. But the thing that made it possible was remembering at an early age and knowing and feeling and experiencing my connections to, the greater reality, to that God force. And, that was all planned too, to bring in that connection so that the work could happen. And
Well, for me, it wasn't that I was also not being, that I was missing spirit in all those years I was quiet. I experienced spirit all the time. I talked to it. I felt it. It was guiding me. I just didn't have the visitations in my room and the education that I was getting, because I was getting educated in science, planetary systems. I remember seeing the maps of the cosmos. And I remember arguing in school. No, that's wrong. You're wrong. Nuns didn't like that. And neither did the priests. But I was a very, very bad Catholic girl because I argued with them. Not that I did any sins or anything, but I was for sure going to hell. However, spirit was right there by me, totally with me. And I could see it, but I couldn't tell. I couldn't tell my mom, it's right here, you know? So, life is like that. It's just very, very challenging and dynamic. And when all the channeling began for me, that was freaking me out. I mean, the first time I saw it for Jeanne was pretty dang amazing. And then I'm going, nah, can't really be, because I'd never heard of this stuff. Even though I lived in Santa Cruz, I was really ignorant, gratefully so. But I was talking to my husband about this and how he felt. I was asking about his mystical experiences, and he said, "My mystical experiences is when he said for him it was when the Catholic Church said, 'Oh wait, we're wrong. Let's change Mass on this day, or we don't really need it in Latin, or let's." That's when he threw out. And he said it really wasn't a mystical experience. He just started throwing out the church doctrines, but it freaked him out when he saw me bring somebody else in, and he could see the change and realized I was not his wife, I was a man that he didn't know who was possessing my body. And that was quite a frightening experience for him. And of course, and so those are the dynamics and the challenges, just one very small aspect that was quite large in our life, and how all of these things, these mystical experiences, channeling for one of them, really influences the choices we make for the rest of our life. I mean, I could have stopped right then and there, but which I tried to do because it was just very small, minor channeling. I don't know. I don't know if the entity would like being called minor at the time, but then the challenger people started coming through, and that was just so forceful that there was no turning around anymore. And there just was no turning around. Then everything started opening. The doors were opening, flying open, and things were happening all over. There was no stopping all of the experiences that were going on daily, literally daily. And my husband would come home and say, "Hang on." My husband would come home and say, "Who am I married to? Who's here?"
Wow.
It's scary to him, and it's scary to me because I'm thinking, "Well, it's me." And he goes, "Are you sure?" Because he could feel somebody else in there, and I was trying to hide that other being that was talking to me, and he could feel another person in there. So it was just so impactful. And I don't know if people recognize all the dynamics that go on when these changes occur to us and when we start reaching into this other realm. All right, now I'm done.
Well, it also brings up another point about how many have had to be quiet or had to really be particular to the group that they, expose themselves to. Or all of us, I'm sure, have different stories about that. Who do we find to talk to about these experiences? I had the leverage of music, because both my parents were musicians, and they could understand the joy of being in that musical space, which is very much, expanded. And I had a husband who adored knowing that I was like 10 different people all the time. So it was a little different in my household. The kids didn't like it too much. Anyway, so
Jerry still asks me, "Is this you?"
there's so many stories. Anyway, so let's open it up now to yes, Dan.
In the chat, Sally writes, "I was always in trouble too, Regina." Can you maybe elaborate on that, Sally?
In that, especially as a kid, I was considered to have a very active imagination. Let's put it that way. And so I would often share whatever that was. And it didn't always line up with the religious upbringing that I was sort of surrounded by. And so, yeah, and even as a young adult, my husband would get very nervous if I would speak up in church because there was usually something that I was calling into question. But only because you feel like you're prompted around discernment, if that makes sense. And so discernment is still a big focus for me because we do have to really think critically about the information that shows up, and whether or not it's useful, helpful, hopeful, healing, as what is it, Suzanne Giesman or Suzanne Wilson says, one of those, both of them maybe, and how it can be shared with other people. Because not everybody is going to be open to it. I do occasionally get information about a loved one just walking past somebody on the street, and it's usually their loved one niggling, wanting to say, "Hey, I'm here, I'm around you," but you can't waylay people on the street that you don't know to say, "Hey, is your brother on the other side," or whatever, because they may not be open to that information. So discernment is kind of a big one for me. I've had to learn it the hard way.
Me too.
Me
So
too.
that's a key point. Absolutely. So should we go to more questions or stories, or who would like to?
Got Rosemary Stevens, willing to share.
Well, being a Catholic nun, I'm very interested in all of these synchronicities that are being talked about.
Sorry.
No, I understand. I understand. Actually, many of mine are revolving around all of yours. I would say that my most profound mystical experience happened when I was in high school at a Catholic school, boarding school. But I came from a very Catholic family, very religious family, and I was often drawn to prayer. So we had a chapel in the school, and at night I would go and spend some time in prayer in the chapel. And one night I came back into my room and I sat on my bed, and all of a sudden I was taken up, and I can only describe it as this beautiful light and love which embraced me. And I was just out of my body in this love, in this light. I don't know for how long. And it stayed, I came back down at some point, but it stayed with me for about 3 days. But after that, I realized that this light and love was the only thing that would fulfill me. And that's the reason I became a nun. I wasn't a teacher, though. I joined a contemplative order, a monastic order. But as you talk about 8, Regina, and the spirit, and then also as Dan talks about this tube that he went into, I had an experience too of just going into the cosmos and being one with the cosmos. And then after that, this boy that I used to date before I entered worked for NASA, actually helped develop the robots that are on Mars. And when he died, he came to me. And I was so surprised. I mean, it was like 40 years later, and I hadn't had any dealings with him. And I think it was the connection to the cosmos that caused him to come. He's been actually twice that he's come to me. But the 8-year-old experience right now is what I'm going through. I don't know if any of you have read Robin Lansong's Loving Bravely book that has just come out. She was an 8-year-old child, I guess, in New Jersey and the East Coast somewhere, and was kidnapped and dropped by a military man in Zimbabwe. At the time I was there. And it was during the freedom struggle in Zimbabwe. And I had arrived in Africa, in Zambia, in the 70s. Her experience happened in 77. But in 70, actually, she was shot and taken care of by villagers and finally sent home. I recommend her book to everyone because it's very interesting to see the somatic experience of an 8-year-old who's not allowed to talk about her experience. When she's in college, she hears about somebody mentions the Rhodesian War and she just goes out of her body and ends up being not allowed to stay in school and having to face this trauma and to deal with it. So she's written this beautiful book. But I feel our lives are entwined because when I first arrived in Africa, in about 72, we were involved with the freedom struggle. So Zambia was a frontline state. One day I just got this terrible feeling of fear. I couldn't explain what it was. I just had this sense of fear. And we had a group of sisters there working at the hospital in Zambia, a mental hospital, actually. So I went over to talk to them. And the sister that opened the door, I could see death on her face. And I didn't know what that meant. I was shocked, but I just saw death on her face. And she was later killed in a landmine accident. And then it turned out that at that time, my sister on the other side of the world was shot and her friend was killed in a domestic violence experience. So what I was picking up was my sister's being shot. I got a letter a couple of weeks later. But another time I had gone to a farm nearby, and again I picked up this terrible energy, and it almost just made me out of my mind, is all I can say. And the sister that was with me kept saying, "What's the matter? What's the matter?" And I said, "I don't know. I don't know." And the African bishop came and prayed over me. Well, it turned out a couple of years later, this particular farm was attacked by freedom fighters, and one of them was killed and the other was tortured. So I have felt that the mystical and the psychic, as you were talking about, is very much, what's the word?
Intertwined.
Yes, very much intertwined all of my life. That initial experience, I was guided to go to Africa. I was guided to enter whatever monastery I was entered. And then all the way through, there's been, I mean, as she was talking about singing, when I started mediumship, the thing I could sense mostly was the angels singing. So, and often in my readings, I'm saying somebody's coming in with a lot of singing. And it turns out that the person was either a singer or that it's the angels that are coming in. So I do feel that as we talk, the spirit is very active in all of our lives, intertwined, and especially maybe in this meeting.
That's tremendous. Are you writing a book?
Oh, I did write a book. It's just never been published.
We need to see that take place, because when you started talking, I'm not looking for things around any of you sharing, but it just popped up, and I thought all I got was this big sign that said healer, and healer, healer, healer. Like wherever you go, there's that healing energy with you. Seems to be your biggest asset amongst many of your skills, and I know you know that, but I don't know you, so it's wonderful when I get a hit like that, and of course, because you came in with this, that's why your life directed you, of course, the way it is, as we all understand and recognize. But I just love hearing the synchronicity of our choices, and
Well, actually,
actually,
when you say healer, that's interesting because my guide, it was my spiritual director, a monk from Big Sur Hermitage, who died in 2015. But when he comes through, he always points out what's wrong with the person in front of me to start with. You know, either I'm getting something wrong with your right foot or your left arm or this, and then they'll say, yes, 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 yes. So I would say, well, I think he's sending healing energy, but no, spirit is sending healing energy.
Well, you're a vessel. You're a conduit. There's this agreement between the two of you. But there has to be that within ourselves. There has to be that ability within ourselves to key in with the guide that's on the other side or whomever is channeling through us to make that happen. And so, it's a mutual experience between you and your guide. It's wonderful. It's just so exciting. And I think personally for me, I love these stories because it's very inspirational because we all have things that are intense in our lives and things we work through, and to be inspired by others' experiences is a blessing. And I really bless you for sharing all that. And let's just know that at some point your stories are going to be heard, and however it gets published or however it's disseminated to others, I think it's really important. It's our whole world is about stories. And yeah, thank you so much for sharing. Just lovely. Just lovely. And there's more, Dan, so I'll let you find them and bring them in.
In the chat, Beth says, also willing to share. So Beth, please.
Yes, I'd love to share. Like a lot of you, I was brought up in a very religious atmosphere with background. My parents used to take the three of us, myself and my brothers, to church regularly. And I was very fascinated by Jesus, and I was fascinated by all the parables. But gradually, as the years went by, I got more and more disillusioned because my main focus was to have a relationship with God. And going to church did nothing, absolutely nothing for me. And as I got into my teens, and as I got older into my 20s, I probably stopped going to church at about 18. And in my 20s, I started to look. I found a couple of books, automatic writing, and was actually quite fascinated. But in the 60s, there was not much around, and I found it. I couldn't find anything that sort of gave me connection. Going into my 20s, I had nothing apart from, up until the age of 7, I was actually going out of my body, and I actually had quite a number of sorties around my local neighborhood, and I'd worked out that they were very real. I can still remember them vividly, but those experiences were wonderful, but they stopped at about 7 or 8. So going back into my 20s, I was still looking for this connection with God, and I tried everything. And the next 20 years, I tried praying. I went on retreats, silent retreats, but nothing. There was nothing. And I felt, I can remember feeling very bereft. So get to the 70s, and by the 70s, I had 3 children, 10, married, and I had a series of episodes, situations, experiences that culminated in me being near to a breakdown. I was desperate, and I didn't know where to turn. I wanted to get out of my life. I knew I couldn't leave my 3 children. And I went up to my bedroom one day, middle of the day, sat on the side of my bed and screamed at God and said, "Where are you? I need you. I need you now." And with that, I had an amazing feeling of stillness that came over the room. And I can remember the stillness more than anything. And then at the end of my bed, there was this massive being of light and the light filled the whole room. I was terrified, I have to say. My first initial reaction was terror. And I put my hands over my eyes because I was aware of the figure sort of 2-3 foot away from me. And I could still see the figure through my closed eyes and with my hands over my face. But the next thing I realized was that there was peace that came over me, tremendous peace, and at the same time, incredibly joy. And I hadn't had peace like it. I've never had peace like that in my life. And the joy that was there was incredible too. The situation stayed with me, that peace, that joy stayed with me for weeks. And I gradually got back into family life, got on with my life, and realized that that help, that day had enabled me to pick myself up, carry on with my life. I still looked for God. I was still searching. And interestingly, a few years later, I told my parish priest about it. I thought, I wonder what the reaction will be. And he was very quiet afterwards and looked at me and he said, "You're extremely lucky," which I thought was really nice and a lovely reaction. But I carried on looking, carried on searching. And 6 years ago, I found the Divine Love Community. And Wendy knows Alan Jean Fike, and started praying with them. And incredibly, I found that peace and that joy praying with this community. And I'm still with them now. And this year has been extremely difficult for me because I lost my husband earlier in the year. But the peace and the joy has helped me so much through this year. So I feel so blessed and so grateful. And I just feel that I have got that connection and I value it so much. I feel very, very blessed.
That is just so awesome.
What a beautiful story.
Awesome story. And I love that when we really seriously ask when we're at the end of our ropes, and I had to laugh when he said that, not because I thought it was funny, but I've been there myself. When it's like, where are you? I did everything you've asked of me. Now I'm in this mess. What? And it's part of the human experience, the way we process the things that happen. But thank you so much for sharing. It's a beautiful, beautiful story.
Pleasure.
A true story.
Thank you so much, Beth. Ellen,
may I make a comment here before we go to Ellen? I think is the next one. So hang in there, Ellen. I think one of the tragedies that is in many of our religious trainings, and I'm not saying just Catholic or anything. I just think the biggest tragedy that we have from the get-go, is that we're praying outside ourselves. We are praying towards something. I remember being very little, and when they'd say, "Raise your head to God," I would tuck myself head in and I'd pray to myself, because I always felt, He's not out there. It's not out there. It's here. And I would get a hit on the back of the head by one of the nuns. Raise your head. Slap, raise your head. And I'd say no. And I'd go back down and she'd hit me again. Because I always I believed, I just knew God was inside. But to continually always tell everyone he's outside, you got to pray for him outside. He's out there. It's something that you pray and ask for it to come to you. And I think that we have done such a dishonor if this is really the source, the God, the Allah, the Yahweh, all the rest of those words that have been named for such a supreme entity and being, then, it's not there. It's right here. And that's one of the biggest things I always share with people. It's not there. It's here.
I so agree, Regina. I think the other thing is that when you actually have got that connection, you realize the connection is with everybody as well. We are all connected, and the connection that you've got, and the peace and that joy, it comes with the connection. It took me quite a long time to realize, I think, that I, as you said, I was looking outside. I was looking for a connection, but that is a sad thing. I think about the religious bodies that we have, that they're all clouded up with so much dogma and creed and ceremonies, and the connection that you have is the God within. And so, yeah, I so totally agree with you.
Yeah, well, I think there's some other stories. I shouldn't hog the mic here. Ellen,
Yeah, Ellen, I think it's next.
Thank you. I love this, that we're doing this. Mine is a different tradition. I have some Choctaw heritage, and my great grandmother was a healer. There are stories about her healing bleeding disorders and that sort of thing. And for me, my story, it started in a sweat lodge, and this was probably, I think, about 25 years ago now or more. And I was just in the sweat lodge, and I was, praying, and I saw this vision of this field of crows. And it was just like this entire field was just full of crows. And beyond it, there was this beautiful mountain range. And I heard my grandmother's voice. And at that time, my great grandmother was my guide. She would, like, I'd be taking a bath and she'd be sitting on the toilet seat, and she and I would be communicating. And she said to me, pick up your stick and start walking. And that's a traditional Choctaw story about how they found home. Is a nomadic tribe that would plant the stick every night, and then in the morning, whichever direction the stick fell in, that's the direction that the people would walk. And then when they reached Naniwaia, which is in Mississippi, which is near where my actual grandmother was born, not just the great grandmother, but my grandmother, they planted the stick and the stick stayed. So when I heard in the sweat lodge, pick up your stick and start walking, I knew I was being shown something that had something to do with home. And I think it was the following summer, I went to a women's camp, and I ran into an old friend of mine, and she invited me to her house after the camp. It was up on one of these islands here in Washington where I'm living now. And I went to her house, which is a big stone house. And when I parked my car, I walked around the house, and there was the field of crows, and there were the mountains. And as I approached, the very vision that I had, the crows just took off, just as they did in the vision. Well, that was now, 24 years ago. And so not long after that, I moved up to Vancouver Island, which is near the Olympics, but where I was living, I couldn't see them. They weren't there. And then life happened. I had 2 periods of homelessness that were quite distressing. But during that time, I was traveling around. I was doing a lot of work, rescue mediumship kind of work, working with, I follow my pendulum over a road atlas, and I would go to a place, and that's where I would work with the souls that were in that place. And a friend of mine invited me to this island I'm living on now. And so 22 years after I had had that vision, I was living up in the north part of the island where I would, during the whole COVID thing, I would walk down to the beach and I would see those beautiful mountains, those Olympics. And I said, okay, I'm home. And then my landlady died and I got kicked out of that house so they could sell it. And this friend of mine who owns this farm, who I was helping during the pandemic, I would come down here, we could work outside, we could participate in, and I was helping her with all of the veggies, and I'd go home with these armloads of this beautiful veggies and eggs and everything. When I got kicked out of the house and wound up in my minivan and living in my minivan, she says, Gary and I've wanted to build another place on the farm, so we're going to build you a house. And so they built me this little cabin that I'm living in now. And we built it together. We all worked on it together. And there's a Buddhist retreat center across the road. And it's called Windhorse. Now, I didn't think about this until my cousin sent me a loom to weave on. So I was weaving, and so I looked up the Choctaw traditional story about Spider Grandmother, which is kind of parallel to a Prometheus story, to send to her. And I noticed that there was this Choctaw story about Windhorse. And the Choctaw story about Windhorse is all about this magical horse that carries this young boy to the land of the dead. And quite literally, I have a marble sign outside my bedroom sliding glass door that says Windhorse. It's on a rock. And it's like, give me a sign. Okay, here you go. And every day anytime I leave home, now I can't see the Olympics from where I am, but whenever I come over the mountains, over the little hill, I can look and see this incredible panoramic view of those Olympics that I was shown, just like when I was in the sweat lodge. So I know I'm home. I know my work is with with those who are on the other side of life, and so that's my story.
And it happens, and it's wonderful because you listen, because oftentimes things are given to us and we deny it, or we deny it, or we deny it, and then we get into real trouble. Wonder why things aren't working well. And the trust that you have in the flow, even though it was tenuous at times, that's the other part of evolving in this particular field of energy, is to be able to find the truth of ourselves, that God within, that essence, all those parts of ourselves in an environment which does not foster that. And I was talking recently with my son-in-law about the fact that on Halloween, he's a high school teacher, English teacher, and on Halloween, he just has his kids talk about their stories. He goes towards more like, the paranormal or the spooky ghost stories because it's Halloween. But many of them talk about their experiences with spirit. And here they have a safe format. The kids love doing it, so they really respond lovingly to each other. But a lot of the kids in his particular area are indigenous, and so it's just kind of a natural thing for them. And it's wonderful when an adult teacher says, "Oh yeah, let's talk about these." No judgment, just honoring their experiences and what was going on for them, all different ranges of things, and encouraging them to be free within their spirit to go with it. And so, Ellen, you're leading and following the leading, which is what the Quakers say. We're led. Our leading is this, and consensus is a big thing. I love it. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Absolutely. To the next.
Well, anyone else? I don't see anything in the chat right now.
I'd like to hear from Hyacinth.
You're muted. Oh, there we go.
I don't have much to say. I'm listening and learning.
Hyacinth, I know that you have had an experience because it's written all over your face.
Oh. No, which one?
Which one? Choose
How long
one.
ago?
What brought you into your mystical search and experiences?
Well, I imagine that it started with, I thought I saw God and spoke to him. And I was a small child.
That's pretty big.
And he was, as I imagined, a grandfather in a long white gown and a long white beard. And I was very comfortable. And he said, I should be a good girl. Okay. And I said, you be with me. Yes, okay. So life has gone on, and I was very much in the church, Anglican, not Catholic. But I started, after my husband died, a friend invited me to do the esoteric workshops. And so then I got a much wider vision of Jesus and God. It wasn't as the church teaches you, which I find is really rather narrow. And so I go on and I do things very simple. I'm a very simple person. But what I can say is that people tell me of their mystical experiences. And I find that that is my life. I comfort people. You are not mad. No, it's normal. It's so that I can talk. I can understand what they're saying and enter into the conversation. And I feel that
That's invaluable service.
So that's my mission, I feel.
That's an invaluable service you provide.
Thank you. And that brings something up that I would like to talk about, if I can keep the forefront energy going. About the stories and mysticism and all the different stages that we go through. I mean, I was much more a Christian than I am now, and it had power for me, but it was a kind of non-traditional, because in the Quaker field, God was inside everybody. It didn't matter who you were, and we always had this communion after the manner of friends in church, because we were a programmed meeting, which I think I've shared before. And it was a normal thing for me to sit in as a child and sit into. I didn't go to Sunday school because it was hooey to me. I couldn't believe it. Just was too young. It was just like, that's child stuff. I'm 8. Tell me more. But the progression of how we grow from, whether it's the Catholic Church or no church, or another kind of the indigenous culture, or just a regular Protestant, or whatever it happens to be, and the progression and how we name things and rename things and call things over and beyond. And sometimes I think that as we get into more of the what we call the really greater reality and the consciousness, and we read things and participate with mediums who channel the great, whatever zircons from the great planet of the ozone, or whatever, the fifth ray of the 12th hamburger level with cheese on it. There's all these different machinations of, well, I found this part of God, and I found this part of God, and, well, God doesn't exist, and God is this, and this is, and we sometimes have a tendency, as we clear things out, to throw away the culture of this globe. And I think it's important to remember that, when we're not on this globe and we're not on this planet, and we are in other places, like Michael Newton says, with life between lives, or we are, on other planets or other energy band waves that we talk about, or whatever it happens to be in our frequencies. When we're here, it's like, well, when in Rome, when we're here, the progression, the evolution of this planet, in order to explain its existence, has created all these stories. All these religious stories, whether you go into a tribe in the jungles of the Amazon, or whether you're in Australia, or whether you're in British Columbia, or wherever you happen to be, there are these stories. And of course, we've had civilizations that have come and gone, and they've left their stories. And I think it's important for us to embrace the rich heritage of all these stories, because we probably all have participated in them lifetime to lifetime, depending on what our progress we wanted to be with whatever we were doing in our own evolutionary space. And sometimes we throw the baby out with the bathwater. Well, I don't need to really relate to the earth field anymore because I remember who I am from this star planet over here, and this is just a petty place and it's just full of darkness. But we need to remember that we're here because we're on a journey that we've chosen, whether it's coupled with healing, becoming a nun or a priest, or becoming a teacher, or becoming whomever. It's what we've chosen to be here for our own progression, our own evolution, and there's a richness and a beauty of it. It's, for instance, something I haven't taught yet. I don't know if I'll get a chance to do it, but Spirit gave me this model of its 9 worlds. Well, of course, we have a bazillion worlds out there, but what Spirit was creating for me was a method in which to teach how we chose our menu for being here and what we wanted to accomplish. And it includes the avatars, the ETs, the technological world, the sorcery, witch stuff. It's pretty encompassing, and it's fascinating because we do choose from a menu of the things that we want to incorporate in each lifetime. And as we grow from those and through those, sometimes we have a tendency to say, well, I'm done with that now. I don't need it anymore, which is fine. But I think we need to remember the richness of the different learning systems that have been here for us. And we can, of course, decide what we want to include and what we want to let go of. But it's here for a reason. It's part of how this particular energy band of life has been established. And of course, there have been civilizations that have come here, learned what they needed to do, and then they've just gone on. And how many know? Nobody really knows how many civilizations have been here, learned what they needed to do collectively, then have moved on. And we could be a part of those civilizations that have learned and gone on and chosen to come back to hold that energy field, hold that vibration for those people who are pretty much bound to this planet, so they can start feeling that. Like Hyacinth said, the stories that she listens to people, and then Beth finding her expansion, and Ellen with her indigenous energy, and all of that. It's just, and I know we all know this, but I think it's good to remember it again, and to embrace. I feel like we're in a department store and there's all different sections of the department store, and maybe we've outgrown the department store, but let's say they add on a new floor with some new experiences, and to embrace all of those and draw from all these different modalities. They become such an integral part of who we are, so that we're universal when we're just out in public. We're universal. Like you said, I forget who it was walking by, knew, I guess it was his sister, Rosemarie, who knew what was going on with people. Maybe I've got that wrong. Apologize. But, knowing that. And then, of course, the ones of you that are really practice your mediumship all the time, you've had this great background of experience from so many different places and times. And I just feel it's important, especially when we come around the holidays and such. And sometimes it's hard to reconcile where we are now in our growth with what we've been taught. But I love as a Quaker, we didn't have rituals, but I love rituals if they're done with the intention of the energy that's involved in it. Even if it's a Catholic ritual, or it's a Protestant ritual, or it's a Hindu thing, or wherever it comes from. These are wonderful ways and paintings to elicit us to be drawn into the culture of evolution and what this particular place has to offer, even in amongst the darkness and the trials and the difficulty of staying in this vibratory place at times. And I use my daughter's name in vain again. Kylene would always say to me, this is a dark planet, Mom. If you can find your light here, you can find it anywhere. And some of us come in just to remember that. Some of us come in just to remember that. And of course, we come in groups to do certain things. And I know that you all know that. But just to remember and to remind ourselves that we may have been participants of creating those cultures. We may have been a part of the Hindu movement that created that whole understanding, or with the Middle East with Jesus, or with the Jewish people, or we may be a part of the indigenous culture. And we've been all these things, all these entities, we've been all these, most of us, particularly because of our breadth of knowledge and understanding. And that is what, to me, is so rich in the mysticism of who we are as people. It's that mystical energy, as I define it, that says I'm incorporating all of these things that I remember and learn and have been a part of before. I don't have to identify purely with one, which most of us don't anymore. We identify with a total collective field, like a united field, and become that God code, which is what Tesla always has talked about, the 369. And if you want to get really heady, I could go in how that was taken out of Atlantis' stuff, but that's a whole nother time. Anyway, we're holding that God code, and however it looks or however it's been shaped, or there's so much richness in that, to be able to hold all those different parts of our cosmic self, of our larger soul energy, and these stories and the mystical part of it. There is that magic in it. Sometimes the Beatles, of course, said it was a magical mystery tour, and I kind of think that's really true. But to be able to honor the mysticism that we carry and honor the mystical memories, I know some of you probably have some great dream spaces and traveling and memories of who you've been in other places at other times, to really understand the value of our own stories and the value of our mystical self, because we don't have to say anything to a person for them to understand and receive it from us. Just go into the gas station, pumping gas, go into the grocery store, getting a loaf of bread or whatever. We carry that energy with us 24/7. And so it's a beautiful thing to be able to offer others without having to do anything, but just really be who we are every moment of the day, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And it's a privilege. It's really a privilege to meet with you and to be able to say, hey, we're all here again. Isn't it fantastic? I know it's been kind of bumpy and this and that, and we might not agree on anything, but wow, we're still here. And we have this memory of where we've been in other places. We recognize each other. And that's such a gift, because it creates this wonderful tapestry around the globe, this wonderful tapestry of life in all places and times. And I just wanted to share that, because these stories in and of themselves create such a picture and create such an energy, which is healing, which is a learning curve, which is reminders, which is soothing, which is peaceful. I mean, wow. It just never ceases to amaze me. And I wanted to just kind of reiterate that. And that mystical part of ourselves is to really be cherished and honored in that beautiful loving way of all the things that we've experienced in life in all sorts of times and fields of energy. So I know Hyacinth has her hand up. So let's go.
I don't know if Lynn would like to speak before. Because Regina said she was, yes.
Okay.
Oh, hi. I don't know if I gather you were talking about me.
Yes, Lynn. Somebody was poking me saying, tell Lynn's story.
Well, obviously there's a few at this age, but when you said that, I guess I was thinking of just that whole sliding door thing, coincidences, synchronicities, because many years ago I was prompted to go on a trip to Hong Kong and China by circumstances. And through that, I met my husband, married, from Hong Kong. And then further down the track, because of all that, I guess, I ended up going and working in a palliative care place in China for a few years. And it was all synchronicity, I guess. And I was just thinking of the children that were there then, one especially, and I don't know if that's what prompted that. And then because of that, a lot of people came together to raise money for that particular place as well. So I guess I was just thinking of all those things that sort of led to that. And that was really one of the most wonderful synchronicity experiences of my life working there. I went back several times. So I don't know if that was part of it, thinking of those children and and what it all led to and how many people came together for it. And I'm going back to Hong Kong in a few weeks, so I think it's sort of all coming back together again. So that's just
fantastic. You listened.
It's
followed.
Just those doors and those synchronicities and things that, you know, sort of all working together, and all the people.
Well, while you're thinking about that, your whole I was looking at your whole energy around you before you even started talking, and it was like this. It just like vibrating, and it was like it was going to explode if it didn't come out. So I'm grateful that you took the mic, and pretty awesome. And the other one that's supposed to be sharing is Giles.
I'm not quite sure what's expected of me.
Giles, what is the story that kicked your butt into gear about looking further, deeper, farther, reaching in and being here every week?
A very simple answer to that. Postmortem Journal by T. Lawrence. I had just happened to have read his 600-page 7 Pillars of Wisdom. And I had liked it so much, I read it twice. And those in the days before cell phones and decent television and so on. And then I read Postmortem Journal, and I realized I was reading the same person, the thoughts and feelings of the same person. I was 18 or so. That was it. Nothing changed since then, except my luck got even better.
Well,
That's pretty.
thank you,
That's pretty
Jonathan.
major.
I would absolutely recommend Postmortem Journal. It is absolutely one of my favorite afterlife related books. I reread it at least once a year, and each time I get more out of it, more detail, stuff I've forgotten, because it's so rich. I think the only hazard with that book is that it's so meaty and so full that we need to remember that not everyone's afterlife is the same. But his account of having been rescued from a dark place and his whole healing process and reorientation is so well expressed, so perfectly expressed. And besides, it's a fun read. Would you agree?
Like so, he's a kind and gentle person, and has got deviated unexpectedly a couple of times in his life, or perhaps more. But anyway, he reviews all of this, and he's speaking, I think, for all of us, because we love to think we're so different, but we are in fact very much the same, and the feelings and emotions that he experiences are very general, in my opinion.
Well, I think
Thank you,
that
Giles.
one of the most important things that's expressed in that book is that on the other side, there is direct communication. If you're in a particular emotional state, that's obvious to those who are close to you. It's not even so much a matter of behavior, but just the energy alone betrays what's really going on inside of you, and you become totally responsible for it on a more conscious level. And I think that was one of the most important teachings, I think, of that book. I just wanted to maybe, because we were talking about religious education, I've felt it might be appropriate to mention my own, and the story takes about 30 seconds, which is the extent of my formal religious education. I was raised in a non-religious Jewish family in the New York area. And at the age of 12 and a half, my father asked me, well, you're going to be 13 soon. Would you like a bar mitzvah? I said, why should I want a bar mitzvah? He said, I don't know, but if you want one, we'll make it happen. I said, well, how do I find out if I want one or not? And Dad said, well, there's a yeshiva a couple of blocks away, Hebrew school. Why don't you go there on Saturday and see what you find? Okay, so Saturday rolls around. I go to the yeshiva, to Saturday school, and all the kids welcome me. Welcome here. It's wonderful, so on. And I say, well, I'm glad to be here. Please, help me understand what's the next step. And they say the most important thing you need to understand is that you're not allowed to say the name of God. I said, what? I come here to learn about God. I can't say the name of God. Oh no, you can't say that. I said, you just said it. Yeah, but you're not supposed to say it. So my next thought was, this is nuts. I'm out of here. And I went home. And that is the sum total of my formal religious education.
Yeah.
And I do need to qualify this. There's a rabbi who is teaching an online course about the afterlife in Judaism. Now, as in the culture where I grew up, it was assumed that Judaism does not recognize an afterlife. And that the rationale for that is that we're here, we need to focus on being good people here. Fine, but to prohibit the idea of an afterlife, it always seemed a little strange to me. So what this course is that this rabbi is teaching is about the fact that there has been, going back to the earliest scriptures, afterlife-related teachings in traditional Judaism. And that the idea that there is no afterlife is a modern invention.
Uh-huh.
That it arose, partly out of the strong intellectual tradition in the Jewish culture, but also as a result of the Holocaust. And that the notion of an afterlife would seem to take the edge off the history of the Holocaust. And that was an influence in bringing into modern contemporary Judaism the idea that it's a material universe, of course, and yet we pray to God and all that. But so I'm finding it really interesting. The initial teaching, the initial session focused on the earliest scriptures relating to the afterlife, and interestingly, they're all referred to the land of the dead as being in the ground near where the bones are buried. And so I'm looking forward to where it evolves into a more subtle notion of the afterlife.
Wendy, could I say one thing to
Of course.
where's she gone? Not Regina.
Jean's
Jeannie. Jeannie's here.
No, she spoke. She gave an interest. Ellen.
Ellen.
Yes, because you all have heard of Neil Donald Walsh.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because you know that how it started with him when he was desperate and said, God, if you're there, speak to me.
Mm.
And then he heard a voice saying, do you mean that, Neil? Or are you just venting?
Yeah. Yeah, he was homeless. He went through a lot of difficulties. Thank you for bringing that up, Hyacinth. That's good to remember.
Because he got this take, paper, and pencil. And that started the conversation.
Where I've really found spirit was in the Alternatives to Violence movement. I joined a movement, it's Quaker based, and when you sit in the circle with everybody, and we did a lot of work with homeless prisoners, grew up in the jails, and when we would we would sit in the silence in a circle, and what impressed me is the most incredible wisdom would come out of the mouth of the most unlikely person. And you would be sitting there and you would just sort of think, my God, where did that come from? And for me, that became probably the thing that's stayed with me throughout all of my life, is just the power of listening and the power of seeing God in everybody, and the power of the circle. And I think that's one of the things that I love about spiritualism, is that you sit in the circle and you, in mediumship, if you're in a mediumship circle, you wait for that inspiration, which comes from unexpected places.
That's beautiful, because I can relate to that, because I was very, very much interested in following Sai Baba, having the Quaker thing, and the Friends Service Committee, which would go into any kind of region, regardless of its political belief systems, to go in just to help without any kind of political statement. They didn't go into the politics of any kind of nation. They went in to help the people that were torn by war, didn't have what they needed, etc. And the circle of the, because that evolved for me too, with the spiritualism and amazing experiences that come from that. When you sit with that expectation that spirit's all around and will communicate, and then you have some, amazing, amazing experiences that come from that. I certainly have had a whole bunch of them. But yeah, that's really wonderful. There was a couple in our meeting that were dedicated to that movement in the prisons, and that's what they were known for. And they were in there all the time, working just tirelessly. It was very impressive to me as an adult, their dedication. I really learned about commitment and dedication to, I don't want to say a cause, but to a situation or circumstances which needed to be taken care of. And, Fred Rogers said, when something bad happens, look for the helpers. And that's the other part of this, of the listening and the observing. You will find the helpers everywhere, who are just in the simplest of ways, are there, and they're steady. They know who they are. They carry that. I guess I'm hung up on the word mystical or mysticism, because to me, for me, it's an exceptional placement of consciousness, which is reverent, which is loving, which is affirming, and in awe. Because sometimes we get so used to our environment, we don't take a moment to look at the awesomeness of the beauty. I know I'm so jealous of Regina lives where she does, because she's in awe all the time of what's around her. And I, for one, have a pretty good view of my environment outside my window, but it certainly isn't where she is. But I've been really working on being in awe of just the morning birds and the crows that come, and then all the other birds that chase each other, and then the tree out front that changes different colors all the time. And just finding that that energy of, whether we call it, I call it the energy of the divine, but the incredible thread which creates, this, we're amazing. I mean, look at us. Look at all these toes and fingers and noses and all this stuff. And you look at the other animals. I was watching a video, because I follow interesting things on YouTube. There's a young couple that travels the world called Nate and Carla. Anyway, they were recently in the jungles where the conservationists have the gorillas and the chimpanzees, and they have these events where they can go in, just very tiny groups, maybe 2 or 4 people with guides, and they bring them into their environment and just have them watch. And Kara was talking about, she actually had a spiritual experience. I mean, she wouldn't say that on camera, but you could feel it in her face and her eyes when she was looking into the eyes of this gorilla. And she said, she knows my soul. This gorilla knows my soul. She looked in and knows my soul. And it's that connection, because we all are connected. Part of our regrouping here is to remind people that we're all one, individually marked in beautiful ways, but come from this web of life. And looking for all those moments of beauty to help us, excuse me, transcend sometimes the ugliness of other things. And being able to replenish ourselves and reinvigorate ourselves to keep being able to move forward. So, yes, thank you. Thank you very much. I have a tickle in my throat. Must be the gorilla hair. I don't know. Excuse me, I'm going to get a cough drop. So, Dan, from there.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Does anybody else have anything they would like to share? Because we're probably coming to the close of the hour. Pam? Pamela? No? What brought you here? What turned you on to Wendy? There's something there.
Is there more than one Pamela?
No, I'm talking to you.
Oh,
I'm being the bad teacher, pointing people out, making sure they're not asleep. Some people are asleep, but that's okay. They're gaining spirit that way. But you know, you have had a good life. You've a different life, and you've had stories that have come and gone, and things that have prodded you into opening your mind. What was the big one? Or go with the most recent one.
I've had many things that brought an awakening to me. Many. I was a very religious researcher. I spent 13 years of my life as one of Jehovah's Witnesses. And I was baptized and I was thoroughly immersed in that religion. And then some circumstances came up and I left it. But I never left that spiritual need that I had in me. And it was really the incident that opened my eyes was at the moment of my mother's death. I had spent the evening with her knowing that she was at the very moment soon to leave. And I went over and I put my arms around her and I told her what a wonderful mother she had been and that she was a wonderful wife and she led a wonderful life. And at that very moment, while I was holding her, she chose to leave. And that left such an impact on me. And it was the hospice chaplain said, she must have been moving up and down, but chose that particular moment to leave. And that was what started my journey to awakening. And many things have happened in the interim. And it was a good friend here that is among us who brought me to Wendy. And it is one of the joyful experiences that I have. And there are many things that I could share, and there are other things that I am not allowed to share. But thank you for asking.
That's wonderful. Yeah, dreams, transitions, births, all of that can, instigate the beauty of awakening to something more than who we are. Wow, what a wonderful conversation. I'm sure all of you, I look at Gordon and some of the others, and I know you have stories and appreciate you carrying them with you, and someday it would be really exciting to hear your stories, or at least a few that kept you moving forward in your gifts and who you are as beautiful human beings as well as spiritual beings, and continuing to just aid the planet with your energy just by being who you are.
Absolutely. It's what an experience. Thank you for letting me call on you, Pamela. But, sometimes I just blurt things out because somebody behind me is knocking on my head. saying, would you please call on?
Probably was her mother.
I was
Probably
going to
was.
say it was probably my mother.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, I speak with my mother often. So
and
I
she's
think it
great.
could have been my mother or my partner.
And Pamela, I think there's something that, I'm going to say this for all of you. When we speak of these experiences that we've had with our loved ones as they are passing or transitioning or exiting or rising, however you want to call it, when we share these experiences, it really is such an incredible connection that you have with that individual in the moment again. You're reliving the moment, the emotion, the experience. And when you do that, they are also reliving their birthing, their transition. And that there's a joy in there because they are being freed from their body. And she was literally going right through you as she exited. So what a hug, what a joy, what a beautiful, beautiful experience. And she's grateful that you shared this out loud with this group. So please, recognize that keeping things secret when they're like this, it wasn't necessary. It's good to share certain things. I don't want you to share anything that you don't want to, but sometimes we hold back, and I know I'm very much this way. I hold back from saying things because I think, nobody really wants to hear about it anyway. When in fact, they do. You are wanting to be heard, and all of those on the other side want to hear. I've got to share this last thing here that happened this morning. If everybody doesn't mind, I'll try and be as quick as possible. Just because I want you to understand something about the other side. I was taking my hike down in these trees that you're seeing right here, and I was just wandering around, and I could feel all sorts of entities joining me, and it was quite delightful. Absolutely delightful. Some I know, some, kind of just strolling along with me. But one I hadn't seen for a while or felt for a while. And I know you all know him, John Denver. I had not felt him for months for some reason. Normally I do when I'm hiking around, but he hasn't been around. And I said, "Hey, where have you been?" And he goes, "Well, I've been really busy lately." And I said, "Well, what are you doing?" And he says, "Well, I've been doing a lot of rescuing." And he said, "Because people have forgotten them because they're focused on somewhere else." And I said, "Well, who are you rescuing?" And he said, "I'm rescuing, there are so many more dying in Ukraine." And he said, they're still dying, and they're getting into winter and things, and they are still, they're losing their lives, and a lot of them are needing help. And at one point in time, when the Ukraine war first kicked off, lots of people were doing rescue work. And now the focus, of course, is for other parts of the country and parts of the world. So he wanted me to know that there are a lot of beings on the other side that are doing massive rescue work still in so many places. And his focus, he said, he played music everywhere in the world, lots of Europe. And he said, they recognized me when and so he said, they recognized me. So I'm just picking them up and taking them over. They know who I am. And so he says, so I'm singing over there. I'm playing my music and I'm calling them like a Pied Piper. So I'm letting you know this because it's a very interesting thing that I stumbled upon this morning in my trees. And I was so grateful that he expressed that to me. And I just wanted you to know that, we think that these entities are for one person or another only. They're working. they're all working. They continue to do so much in so many ways. And just like we're doing so many different things, they are too. And they're not all earthly, of course, but it was just invaluable. I just feel that was a mystical experience I had.
Well, and
And
his music has been appearing still, and they play it at different big events and big stadiums, like for big footballs in Europe when they were having the big games, and they were playing in Germany, country roads, and they were all singing along. And this was recent. So whether it's John Denver or others, their energy is still here, obviously, and of course goes everywhere, and they're still using that in a very positive and powerful way. And I'm really glad that you could mention that. I would like to tail in on that, saying that if any of you really enjoyed Robin Williams, on the 5th of November, this coming Tuesday, there is a movie coming out, and the movie is a comedian that had met Robin several times and had actually done impersonations of him, named Roger Cabler, and literally Robin is performing through him, and he doesn't quite say that aloud, but he does in some ways. It is magnificent, and I hope people understand what's going on there, because he got 100% review from Rotten Tomatoes, which is really incredible. So here is Robin using his energy still, and some of the takes that they didn't put in the movie talk about the stress that Roger felt in trying to do this, and thought, people are going to think I'm crazy. How we're going to get this done, and it's going to be available on streaming services, including Amazon. If you're a Robin Williams fan, I can't wait until Tuesday, not just because it's election day and my grandson's birthday, but because the movie comes out. And it's another way that these people who have, not all of them, but these people who are very humanitarianly oriented anyway, are still continuing to use their influence to help us out. And the other thing I want to plug is you got to go to cosmicvoices.network and read what Regina put up about her experience recently with a friend of ours, and as she's getting ready to transition. And
that's Facebook.
That's the Facebook.
It's the Facebook. It's okay, but it's wonderful. So it's the Cosmic Voices on Facebook, and it's a beautiful, beautiful story in terms of transitioning. But this has been a wonderful experience, and I want to be able, if it's okay now, to walk us out of the
just before we go, can we have Gordon? Gordon Finn's had his hand up for a little while.
Absolutely.
Oh, sorry, Gordon.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I knew you were probably disappointed that I wasn't contributing earlier on, but my issue is I've had so many mystical experiences, I didn't know which one to pick to talk about. But when you started talking about John Denver, Regina, that fascinated me, because I have channeled him several times, but not in any public forum or in any of my books, unlike, Robin Williams and all those other people, because a private client has asked me to do so. And I've done it about 3 times for this person, and who probably would like to remain nameless. But so I've had quite a bit of interaction with John Denver, and I'm not surprised by anything that you said about retrieval work or Ukraine or whatever. But just fascinating that I was thinking, well, I'll just skip contributing this week because, everyone's got interesting stories, not just me. And then you mentioned this, Regina, and I went, oh, John Denver, amazing. And like I say, I've never gone public with this John Denver thing because it's for a private client. It's personal messages for this person. And, I didn't feel it was appropriate. But also, I just like to mention my notebook on retrievals book is out now on Amazon. So if anyone wishes to refresh their knowledge of retrievals and how various people, including myself and others, do them, that's the book to have a look at.
Excellent. Well, we have a long history with Sean Denver too, which is for another time.
Please
But
put the link, Gordon.
Huh?
Put the link for your book.
Okay, I try to figure out how to do it. It's called A Notebook to Retrievals.
Okay, I'll get it. I'll put it up.
And it's on Amazon, ebook and book. It's there now.
Wonderful.
And don't forget, Gordon has a group every second Wednesday. It's on this week, helping people learn how to do retrievals. And as we said, it is very, very needed at the moment. I mean, it's always needed, but with the numbers of people who are crossing over, and it's wonderful, wonderful work. That's on Wednesday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. Am I right, Gordon?
Yes, it is still
3
at 3
p.m.
p.m.
Eastern Time.
Can I ask Gordon, with all of these people who are being killed in wars, a lot of them must be just totally unexpected.
Exactly. Exactly.
And that's why there's so much confusion about departure. And some of them, they're laying in the hospital, and then the next thing they're not. They're over. They died in the hospital because for one thing or another. So there's just tremendous confusion, and that's what John Denver told me. He said he's being the Pied Piper, and what I totally could see that completely. It was just such a wonderful message, and I'm so grateful to be able to share that today.
Thank you. And I would like to add, I had hoped to be teaching a class for you guys. There's some circumstances that just are preventing that at this time, but I'm hoping to do a 6 series with Seth after the first of the year. And so if anybody's interested in that, he's going to be addressing the future and teaching the children and how to connect the dots with who he is and his oversoul energy and how to prepare the younger ones coming in. We've gotten some of the information already, and so if you guys are interested, I will bring more information as I can get it all organized. So I think these are all incredible things, and grateful. But yeah, yes. So now John's all excited. Goes, oh my God, we have to say goodbye. He said, I want to say more. Like, no, John, you're gonna have to say that's gonna have to be for next time. Maybe some Christmas messages.
Yes. Just one little thing where a very old woman said to me, I can only tell you this. I can't tell my family. They will think I'm crazy. But I went into the study and Eugene was sitting at his desk. So I said, he was. Be glad that he let you see him.
Good.
Wonderful.
Beautiful. Oh my
So
God.
we're ready to wrap up and bring us out of the shield. And for those people who left, I'll make sure that they get out too, because it is an energy field that they're in, and we have to, finish what we started. But what a wonderful day. Thank you all so much for your inspiring stories. And just we continuing on, and we'll see what's going to be happening next month. I think it's going to be wonderful. I think it's going to probably be messages from Spirit. I'm feeling that already. We'll see if that holds true. And not that you don't get your own, but it's so much fun when other people come through from other sources. So, but we'll see. To be announced. But let's just take a moment, deep breath, as we are in appreciation for this time together, the fellowship, the community, the support, and let's just see ourselves disengaging from one another, because we would like to be collective in this situation, but as we go on about our day, we need to not be in each other's fields so closely, so we have our own autonomy and suddenly start craving somebody else's food because we're in their space, because that has happened. Or, if there is a person who likes a certain beverage and we don't want to drink their beverage for them, or just saying, oh, suddenly I have to go to the park when it's midnight because somebody else is going to the park. I mean, that happens. So we want to disengage in a loving way. I've talked about changing our psychic signature, which means that we just set the intention that our signature changes so that we are not seen by those other forces that we just don't want to have anything to do with, because they're out there whether we want to know it or not, but we know how to work with it. And then to just make sure we're back in our bodies, which in the SRT world, we talk about being 100% clear of portals or functions, which means come back from our expansion, come back into our bodies, all the way down to our feet, and that clarity and that balance and wholeness. And we just bless the whole experience, and we were thank you to participants on both sides, and let's know that we are going to have a really blessed week and more inspiration, more goodness, more connecting the dots, and just oodles of love and appreciation for every single one of you.